Good evening all and welcome to day 3 of Ghost Week. Tonight I've got a collection of demonic, scary stories for you to enjoy. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. When I was 4 years old, my 7-year-old sister died. It was a sudden death. A bike hit her when she was with her friend. She was announced brain dead, and then a few hours later was taken off life support. My family has a lot of stories about the paranormal, and honestly I enjoy hearing about them. The night my sister died, my mum was driving past the crash but didn't know. I'm not sure what lights they were, but there were 2 lights on the car that didn't go out by themselves. Like if they were to turn off, both had to be off. It's impossible for only one to go off on its own. But my mum drove past, and one of those lights went out, and then my sister's favourite song came on the radio at the same time. My dead sister and I shared a bedroom, but I obviously got lonely since I was now alone in the room. My older sister decided to come into the room with her best friend at the time and hang out with me. We basically heard something under our dead sister's bed, and when I looked under it I saw a little girl with no face, just voids as eyes, a white hospital gown, and medium-length, dark brown hair, and a bloody wound on the right side of her head. I honestly forgot about it until I turned 11 or 12. I was sitting in my room. We'd moved houses a few times since then, and I looked at the end of my bed, and that thing was peeking out at me at the end of it. I started drawing it afterwards, and when I showed it to my older sister, she was genuinely terrified. My sister is 24, so she remembers our sister a lot better and says it looks exactly like her. The weird thing is I wasn't allowed at the funeral and never saw my sister's body after she died. Turns out she had a head wound, which the demonic attachment had. I believed it disguised itself to look like my sister, but after I started calling it out for what it really was, it stopped pretending. I didn't see it for a while. My younger sister, who never met our dead sister, began seeing it as well. And just as I thought it was gone, I saw it in my mum's car. A dark figure with creepy eyes, but I knew it was the attachment. I get a horrible feeling of dread when it's near, and I was terrified. I've never been scared of it before, but there's something about it that just looks drop-dead scary. Who knows if my house is haunted too? But whenever I'm home alone, I hate going near my mum and little sister's room. Like there's just a horrible feeling I get. Maybe that's because a few times I've looked into my sister's room and seen something similar to what I saw in the car. And my mum tells me she hears a child running around her room and sitting on her bed at night. What do? I don't really believe in God, but honestly I'm tired of this demon and I want it gone. I believe I spoke to my dead sister with paranormal rods at her grave, and she said she wasn't at peace because of the demonic attachment. She says she's trying to keep me safe from it. I take any advice. I want it gone, but I also want my sister to finally find peace. This all happened in 2014. I'm a reverend from one of many churches in my country. Our church sends out its ministries to places around the country where they are needed. And for my sins, I was sent to a very small remote town right in the middle of nowhere. It's a little town where everyone knew everyone. The church also owned a house that was used by the minister of the church, so we moved in. It was my family, that was my wife, my toddler and myself. It was an older house, perhaps built in the 40s, and it housed many ministers and their families before ours. We stayed in the house for about 3 months before colleagues of mine and people from the town started asking how we were doing in the house, if we heard the noises or the footsteps yet. I found that a very strange question because we had not heard anything. In fact, coming from a busy city, we almost complained that it was too quiet. In the 5th month, I had to leave my family for a church affair. That meant leaving them alone for 4 days. I was a little uneasy about this, because there was a crack in the fence around the property, and I was concerned for my family's safety. To be clear, I had no concerns about the paranormal. I had concerns about the criminal aspects that could harm any family, mine especially. I would speak to my wife every day, and she would complain about hearing footsteps by the bedroom windows at night. She would hear whispers at night, and the like. We thought it was people trying to break into the house, nothing more. I returned from church business and the noises ceased. In the weeks to follow, I got myself a surround sound system for my TV and hooked it up. That Friday evening, I felt like testing it. So I chose a movie, Mama, because I loved the movie and thought the jump scares would be epic through the surround sound. This was not my wife's thing, so we said goodnight to our baby girl and placed her in the cot in her bedroom. I said goodnight to my wife, and I went to the TV room to start my movie. The surround sound system really did its job. I got proper scared many times in the movie. Then all of a sudden, I heard this very loud, very angry scream that chilled me to the bone. My heart was racing. I had goosebumps all over. I paused the movie and listened, and all there was silence falling over the house. That was when my baby girl began to cry. She was squealing so desperately that I knew something wasn't right. My wife is a very good mother, and so I thought that she would go to see our baby girl, but nothing. Our baby just continued to squeal and cry. So I got up and ran to her bedroom, and as I entered her bedroom I was hit with such a cold in her room that I instantly had goosebumps. My baby was standing in her cot, and she was pointing at the darkest corner of the room while crying uncontrollably. I grabbed her and held her close, saying, "It's okay, baby, Daddy's got you." I then looked at the corner of the room, trying to see what it was that my baby girl was pointing at, but could not see anything. But it was at that moment that all the hairs on my body raised and I felt nauseous and weak. I raced out the door to go and find out where my wife was, and why she didn't react when she heard our baby cry. But as I entered our bedroom, I saw that my wife was as white as a ghost, and crying as well. "Hey, what's the matter?" I asked. "Are you okay, love?" I went over to hold her as well. She told me that she heard this growl, and then this dark mass came through the window, across the bed, and flew into our daughter's room. She said she couldn't even move, even though her maternal instincts begged her to. She was paralyzed. I thought to myself, what am I to do about this? I then reminded myself that I am a representative of God. I have the authority to handle this entity, so I grabbed my Bible and my anointing oil and started to bless the house. I started way at the bottom of the house, every window, every mirror, every doorway and passage. I blessed the house. It was going so well, and after every room I felt more and more confidence. But then I got to the room where my baby girl slept. As I entered the room, I felt weak again and nauseous. I felt depressed and overwhelmed by all kinds of negative thoughts. I remember that there was this thought in my head that I have blessed the house, and now I can stop. But then all of a sudden I continued with the blessing and the anointing of the house and moved closer and closer to the corner and rebuked the demon in the name of Jesus Christ. I remember reading Psalm 91 right there. I said a prayer of protection over my daughter's cot, and I still thanked God and joked, "This room is now clean." I then went to my wife in my bedroom where the two ladies were waiting on the bed. I anointed them with a cross on their foreheads, and my wife anointed me on mine, and we prayed as a family. My wife and I finished off with praying the Lord's Prayer, and what was amazing is this. The moment we said amen, there was a smell of flowers that filled the air, and with that came a feeling of complete peace, and we slept soundly that night. Interestingly though, my wife never heard the voices or the footsteps at night again. It makes me wonder if they were all connected. We have since moved on, and I'm serving another church now. But I will never forget the day that a demon came for my daughter. I will never forget the power that can be found in the Lord and the power of prayer. My name is Anthony, and this is my story about an exorcism I witnessed with a group of friends while living in Alabama in 2021. Everything in this story is 100% true. As you'll soon discover, there were multiple witnesses of the event. It was something I never thought I'd experience in my lifetime, but I guess life is full of all sorts of surprises. Before diving in, here are some key details. I had moved from Illinois to Dutton, Alabama in 2020, where I would end up with my ex-girlfriend, Luna. Since late 2018, Luna had taken a liking to my music and artwork on social media. Over a course of time, we got to know each other very well. We lived a distance away, however, as I was living in Illinois while she was over in Alabama. We would plan trips to see each other, which eventually turned into a relationship. However, she was still living with her ex-boyfriend Sven. Sven had been in her life for over a decade, but their relationship had been broken for many years prior. They were basically just best friends living together, and when COVID hit in early 2020, I made the choice of moving in with them, as we were uncertain of getting the chance to travel while COVID got increasingly worse. At the time, Luna was also polyamorous, so we had come to an agreement to keep our relationship monogamous if we wanted to be together. I was skeptical at first, but took the risk. Sven and I got along fairly well though, and he became a good buddy of mine. He was a huge history nerd and collected a bunch of historical antiques and weapons. I settled in nicely to the complete change of living in Alabama, getting to experience a whole new side of the country. Even if I was living in an older house in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by cropped farmland and cattle, I was still happy. In early July 2021, Sven, who had been single for quite some time now, met a girl called Sally at his job while working at Walmart. She approached him, as she felt drawn to his energy of sorts. They quickly took a liking to each other and started hanging out more. Things were going fairly well for them throughout the beginning of their relationship. From what I've seen, she was very kind and intelligent. She loved to laugh and occasionally indulge in smoking bowls. However, we eventually discovered that she had an intriguing spiritual side to her as well, mentioning that when she was really young, her mother forced her to perform a blood oath ritual using some sort of old satanic book and a pentagram, and that in doing so, it made her vulnerable to the dark spirits which leached off her energy. Since then, she would experience a number of paranormal encounters, such as feelings of being followed, shadow apparitions, hearing voices, and most profoundly, dark entities taking control. Beyond that, she had a heightened sense of awareness. Sally was fully transparent with all of this, however. Sven had no real issues with any of it. It was around midnight on a weekday. Luna and I were getting ready for bed, as we both had to work the next day, and across the house was Sven's room, down a long hallway. Sally was spending the night hanging out with Sven, just having a good time. As Luna and I were about to fall asleep, we heard a loud thud from outside our door. A few minutes later, Sven knocks on our bedroom door calmly and asks if we can help him with something. Luna gets up to go check what was happening, while I stayed in bed. I waited about 10 minutes trying to listen in on what was going on. Curious, however, I got up and checked the situation. I peeked my head from the side of the door and saw Sally on the floor in the middle of the dark hallway, mumbling under her breath, "No, no, 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 no." It was almost as if she were trapped in a bad dream of sorts. My original thought was that maybe she had been on drugs and was possibly having a bad trip. No clue at first, so I stood back and watched with concern. As I observed the situation, both Sven and Luna huddled around Sally while trying to comfort her and get her to wake up. Eventually, we all decided to pick her up and bring her outside to get some fresh air, and we laid Sally on the grass in front of the yard under a bright moon. She gradually started regaining consciousness while waking up in a haze. As soon as she was able to speak, she said to me in a soft voice, "I can sense that you're nervous and confused. It's okay," which I was. This strange occurrence is something she had apparently experienced many times, however, so she was familiar with this sort of thing happening. She explained it as basically being trapped in a dark void of sorts, that she's essentially unconscious, with no ability to recollect what happened. Being that Sven and Luna are more aware of spirits and energy, they knew almost instantly what was going on, and took precautions to alleviate the situation. After she gathered her thoughts and regained her energy a bit, we bring her back inside and lay her on Sven's sofa, while Sven holds her in his arms. He points out some scratch marks on the back of her shoulder that weren't there prior. It looked fresh, and almost as if clawed by a large cat. He also states that for some odd reason, she was being drawn into the bathroom across the hallway, and that her face went completely blank while slowly walking out the room. He even points out the light in the hallway between the room and the bathroom, which had blown a fuse right after she collapsed near the door. That had me spooked, and the light hadn't worked ever since. Once Sally was able to speak to us more clearly, she told us that something was trying to trick her into going inside the bathroom across the bedroom. Some evil entity manifested itself there, and she was playing mind games. Keep in mind the house we were living in was really old and dingy, with noticeable holes in some spots on the floor throughout the entire house. The worst of it being in the bathroom. There were 2 total bathrooms, however, so we never used that room for anything. It was always kept closed, and it was dirty and smelled of mold. Also note the house was only $300 a month to live in, so we all dealt with the many problems that came in with the price. That's Alabama for you, I guess. We investigated the bathroom, which gave us all a very uneasy feeling. It was cold, dark, and had a stillness I couldn't quite describe. It also made the hairs on my arms stand on end. At that point I was feeling a bit anxious, but I did the best I could to keep my composure. Shortly after investigating the bathroom, Sally started to get taken over by the void again. Her eyes became glassy and red, while the spirit within her became aggressive. She was possessed by a demonic force. While Sven was trying his best to hold her down and locking his arms around her, we knew instantly that it was not Sally in there. The demon was trying to break free from Sven's arms, and while making deep, growling noises. For a period of time, we even tried to reason with it, saying things like, "There's an endless world to travel and be free from under the desert sands to endless oceans. You have no reason to take her over." The demon grudgingly stated it wanted to make itself known, and that someone has to die. Her voice also became heavy and muddled while resisting being pinned down. A few times the demon threatened to kill off one of our cats, all 3 of which were in the room with us. Watching us contained the demon. Keep in mind, Sven is 6 foot tall, a lean male in his 30s, and Sally was a very skinny petite girl, which is why he was boggled down by how much strength it took to keep her in place the entire time. As Sven was struggling to keep this demonic force tight within his grip, my ex told me to grab a handful of fresh sage from the garden outside and burn it. I quickly ran out the front yard and back into the room. Since the sage was fresh, it was a bit harder to burn, but eventually it started smoldering, filling the room with sage, and it was effective in hurting the demon as it growled with every waft. It was easy to tell that it was effectively hurting it. I would continue to do this for the majority of the night by blowing the sage around the room or directly in its face. At times one of Sally's arms would break free, and attempt to knock the sage out of my hand. I had a steady grip on it and did my best to keep it burning. At one point I even made a funny remark toward the demon while it was taunting us. "Who pooped in your cornflakes?" Strangely enough, it chuckled slightly with a deep tone. During this process, we also played spiritually empowering music and tried to channel our energy as a group to cleanse the room and fend off the unwanted guest. We kept fighting for several hours until the sun came up. Gradually, the demon became weaker, while still aggravated and fighting to break free. Towards the end of this event, Sally started to slowly regain consciousness. Or so we thought. We tried talking and comforting her even though she was still pretty disoriented, and Luna decided to fix her up a cup of herbal tea to calm her down. However, without mentioning it, she decided to add a few dashes of pure Himalayan salt to the mug, since salt is known to be spiritually cleansing, and when Sally takes the first sip, she drops the mug on the floor and begins to choke and cough heavily. The demon was trying to trick us into believing it was her, to which it got enraged and took possession of Sally once again. The process continued for another few hours of cleansing and holding her down. Over time, the spirit grew tired and weakened. Its energy was dwindled by the minute. We all stuck together and tackled this unwelcome demonic force. In the early morning at 7 a.m, the demon, now weakened from all the cleansing and resisting, it was nearly drained entirely, and we were finally able to bring Sally outside and hoped for the best. It was a nice sunny morning as we lay her on the grass in the same spot she had previously occupied, and she gradually started to transition back into her body. She was still very weak and unable to move much at all after the possession. We sat her straight up, with her legs straight out in front of her. Strangely, we all took notice of a small green grasshopper that jumped onto her left leg, with her eyes nearly closed. The grasshopper crawls onto her index finger, brings it up to her face, and focuses her last bit of energy onto it for about 30 seconds. She then lifts her arm with her finger, points the grasshopper, and it jumps away. She ties what looked like an invisible knot around a nearby dandelion and gradually fades back into unconsciousness. After this long and tiring experience, we all migrate back to the house and try to catch some sleep. Sven picks Sally up and carries her inside into the bedroom to get some rest. Since I had to go to work shortly after, I ended up getting about 2 hours of sleep, and I was exhausted. However, my mind was blown with just how insane and surreal the experience was. It was a profound awakening of life, to say the least. Until this day, I think about how something like that could even happen. Not many people can say they fought a demon in their lifetime. The next day we had our friend Derek over, who usually hung out with us daily. We had told him about the crazy occurrence from the previous day, and he believed us for the most part, but fast forward to around 11 p.m, where both Derek and Sven were out in the front yard talking with Sally. Luna and I were in the kitchen cooking up food, and at one point, Derek runs into the house and says, guys, I think we're going to need some sage." From what he told us, they were all just hanging outside until Sally's face went blank and started walking away into the darkness. The front yard has a lot of space since the house was essentially sitting on farmland, and the first thing you see when you step outside is a massive field of corn along a deep, wooded area to the right of the house. Sally walked slowly towards the dark woods as Derek followed. He approached her and asked if she was feeling okay. She then turns around slowly with a murderous look on her face and in a growling voice goes, "No." At that point, Derek was frightened and ran back into the house to inform us about the situation. Since we already experienced this the night prior, we were more prepared this time. While at work the previous day, I had brought powdered sage just in case. Both Sven and Derek grabbed a hold onto Sally and bring her back into the house as she was trying to resist. Once again, Sven has her locked in his grip while sitting on the sofa in his bedroom. As Derek and I cleansed the room with sage, Sven and Luna grew tired of this dark force returning into their home, and taunted the demon by saying it wasn't strong enough to do anything to us and that we weren't intimidated. Which, they were right. The demon was noticeably weaker this time, and possession lasted only for about 2 hours. All of which was long enough for Derek to fully witness what we were all describing the night before. He was fully convinced of the evil entity we described and altered his perception on life a bit. None of us are religious in any way, but we do believe in energy in the spiritual realm. We felt that the experience was a confirmation of the dark forces that roam our planet, and there's much more to our reality that we can fully comprehend. Once Sally recovered, she felt more relieved. She mentioned that the demon manifested itself within the shed, which was between the house and the wooded area. She believes the grasshopper had made its way towards the shed to try and reveal itself once more to prove its power. Oddly enough, Sven mentioned that while he and Sally had taken a shower together earlier that day, he noticed at one point that Sally was speaking in 2 voices at once. The other voice sounded noticeably deeper and distant in his left ear. He found it a bit strange, of course, but dismissed it, as he was still tired from the previous night, and tried not to dwell on it. He states the other voice came from the direction of where the shed was. If you looked out the bathroom window, you could see the shed directly outside. Given the experience later that night, however, revealed more of what was truly happening. The demon was still lurking with the intention of controlling Sally again, and after that happened, we never encountered any more strange or unusual situations. We would go on to tell our story to friends and family, where the majority of them would mostly believe what happened. Since then, Sally broke up with Sven about a week after the event, and was heartbroken for a good while. They lost contact with each other, so we will never know if she truly did do any better. I, on the other hand, ended up leaving Alabama after a breakup with Luna. We left on good terms, and I occasionally keep in contact with all of them. It was quite the adventure for 2 years of living there. Despite the strange encounter, I'm glad I was able to experience it the way I did. Before I bring this story to a complete end, there is one final detail I only learned recently. Years after we had all moved on with our lives, the house sat vacant for quite some time. Then in February of 2026, I was just catching up with my friend Derek, who still lives in the state, who shared something that shook me. He and his friend had taken a ride around town and briefly pulled into the vacated house along the way for a bathroom break. At first, everything felt normal, but as they backed out of the parking lot, their headlights swept across the front door. In that brief wash of light, they both saw a shadowy figure motionless, standing just inside the doorway watching them leave. At that same moment, they were hit with an intense cold sensation, an unnatural chill that made no sense in the middle of a hot Alabama summer. Neither of them spoke until they were well down the road. This had us thinking that whatever was in that house never truly left. It simply remained bound to the place itself. What makes this even harder to ignore is something that happened much earlier. On the night of the exorcism, the entity said one thing with chilling clarity: "One of the cats has to die." Not long after that experience, one of our beloved cats, Levi, died suddenly from an unknown cause. I had taken Levi to the emergency vet, and after returning home with no luck on his critical condition, Levi passed away on the property, just weeks before I moved out of state. On its own, I know it might be easy to dismiss, but taken together, the pieces fit too cleanly to ignore. I know it's all speculation, and I won't claim certainty. Still, the timing, the words spoken, and what followed leave me with an unsettling feeling that whatever manifested there never truly left, and the reality that there's more to this life than we can truly perceive. My grandfather on my mother's side stood out as a profoundly brave and unflappable man who dismissed all talks of the supernatural with a gruff wave of his calloused hand, and always labelled such notions as silly things, unworthy of serious consideration, and always cutting off discussions of ghosts or demons by muttering, "No one truly knows, maybe it's God," before returning to whatever task he was engaged in. Folks in our rural village knew him well, and spouted a persistent rumour that his ironclad courage had begun to irk the local demons, mischievous entities blamed for harassing nighttime travellers who dared pass the old cemetery at the ravine's edge, where a rickety wooden bridge spanned a bubbling stream lined with slick clay banks. Curiosity gnawed at me relentlessly after overhearing that tale, so I bided my time for weeks until I caught Grandpa in an unusually jovial mood one crispy autumn day, while he carved intricate patterns into the sturdy oak entrance gate framing our front yard, the air thick with wood shavings and the rhythmical scrape of his chisel. "Grandpa, why do people say you've started annoying the demons around the cemetery?" I asked with wide eyes, and he glanced up with a sly smile before brushing me off. "They're all crazy, that's why." And I pressed harder. "But is any of it true?" He paused, chisel in midair, then resumed without answering as my grandmother called from the kitchen, "Tell him about the lamb from last fall." Shocks rippled through me. Something had happened, and the floodgates opened as I begged for details. Grandpa fixed me with a stern gaze and said that he'd share it with me, but that I must swear to never let it scare me, and to not breathe a word of it to anyone else, and I promised on the spot. He went on to tell me that one rainy night last fall, he trudged along the village to deliver fresh cheese to old Mr. Petrov on the far side of the ravine, beyond the creaky wooden bridge and the cemetery where twisted oaks clawed at the foggy sky. His voice was steady as he described the path. "Weren't you afraid to cross the ravine and cemetery alone at night?" I interrupted, and he laughed. "Afraid of what? Nonsense?" He continued that midway over the swaying bridge, with its splintering planks groaning under his boots, he heard footsteps mirroring his own, double taps echoing off the damp timbers. He spun around sharp, lantern swinging wild, but the path stretched empty behind him, mist curling up from the water below. He pressed on, delivered the cheese amid warm lamplight and grateful chatter, and set home an hour later under heavier drizzle pattering the leaves. At this time, steps rose from underneath the bridge, taunting from the dark ravine. Annoyed, he stomped hard to drown them out, and suddenly a pristine, white lamb materialized ahead, leaping playfully with glossy black eyes that gleamed unnaturally in the gloom. My heart lodged in my throat at the image, but Grandpa stayed calm. "A lamb?" I stammered. "Exactly." It bounced everywhere beside me ahead, on the ropes under the bridge, and I asked it, "What are you doing here?" And it mimicked me back in that thin voice. "What are you doing here?" "The lamb spoke," I gasped, leaning forwards, and he nodded. Echoed everything. Got on my nerves, so I marched on. Over the bridge it cavorted, under it, ahead, non-stop, and I said go away, and it shot back, "Go away." At the ravine's end it halted, glared as I ignored it, and then screeched that next time it'll get me. "What did you do?" I whispered. Smiled. It caved fear, and I had none to give. That's the key. Deny fear and nothing touches you. Always remember that. I suffered nightmares after, avoided that bridge like the plague, but Grandpa's lesson stuck. Fear feeds them. Years later I asked my mum about the lamb and she laughed in surprise. "He told you?" Villagers thought he was mad walking with a demon like that, like it was nothing. That thing trailed him twice more. Nightwalkers saw it perched on the bridge waiting for him, ignoring everyone else. Really? Yeah, but third time he outsmarted it. Started saying, "I believe in God." The lamb parroted back, "I believe in God." and poof, dissolved into dust. No more lamb after that. Smart as hell, I thought. Grandpa's fearlessness won in the end. I have 2 stories. Both were in the same house, same room, and happened when I was a teenager. The first was a dream I had. I was in my room, playing or reading or doing something random on my floor, with my back resting against the bed. I thought I saw my dog run into my room and under my bed. Now my dog scares easily. She actually tore/ate a hole through my door twice during thunderstorms when no one else was home. So I was justifiably concerned and crawled under after her to try and draw her out. The dark, shaking mass under my bed wasn't a dog. In the dream, it was a demon or something similar. I remember the speed it moved, the cold feeling that washed over me, and then things got weird. Good at first, like it was trying to entice me into agreeing with it. Then it turned dark, and I was doing everything I could to nope the hell out of there. I woke up mid trying to fight it off. Just a dream, I thought. That's what I thought, and honestly kept trying to tell myself. Next morning, though, I had bruises and scratches all over, including places like my back, where I couldn't reach to do it myself in my sleep. I slept alone that night too, with no dogs or humans in my bed, so no way someone else could have done something. The next time I was awake, it was night, and I was trying to sleep, but I just couldn't relax. Tossing and turning for hours, I rolled over and my hand hit something cold and hard, like a block of dry ice in my bed. After jerking back at first, I reach out again to see if I was just imagining things. It was too dark to see, but I could feel the air move as whatever it was moved as soon as I touched it again. It grabbed my hair and dragged me towards the headboard. That was the only time in my life I was literally too scared to scream. My head couldn't fit between the wooden poles in my headboard, and I was freed after a few seconds, and spent the next hour in the middle of my bed, constantly rotating to never have my back turned for more than a few moments in any direction in an attempt to calm down. Once I did, I turned on my light, grabbed a flashlight, and looked under my bed. But there was nothing there, except for a clump of my hair by the headboard. Could have just been my hand falling asleep. The first could also have had some realistic explanation, but both of my siblings and I have many stories from our house, and a lot of them match up even when we mentioned it to the other before it happened to both of us. We switched rooms at one point, and I was telling them about something I saw, and they were like, "Yeah, that happened to me for years. It's why I slept with the door closed now." So either we live in a haunted house, or we ourselves draw stuff like this in. I think there must be something demonic in our home. For as long as I can remember, I have been tormented, terrorized, hurt, and gnashed by the same entity every other night. It started with no violence when I was around 14. Back then I was living with my dad, my little brother, and his girlfriend's kids. Me being the eldest child, I occupied the upstairs loft. When we first bought the house, the stairs were old, so we built new ones. It was nothing fancy, just screws and 2x12 planks, but the fresh wood made it easy to tell when someone was coming up or down the stairs. Although sometimes after I would get home and Dad was still at work, I would be in the loft changing for football practice, and the stomping up the stairs would commence, only to turn and see no one. At the time I was shaken, but didn't think much of it. When it came time to leave for practice, I had to check the mail first. I went out the front door, but left it open so I could run the mail back inside. Once I had retrieved the mail, I made my way back to the door. When I got near arm's reach, it slammed shut. It wasn't locked, nothing was interfering with the motion or mechanics of the door, but it wouldn't open. A few months passed by and my dad's girlfriend moved in with her 2 kids and her dad, who had just gotten out of prison and wasn't doing well for himself money-wise. We went out and ate dinner, and everything was great until we got home. We went upstairs to the loft to go to bed after a long day, and fell asleep, and about 2 hours passed, when we heard this amazingly loud banging noise. I couldn't see anything, so I went to turn the light on, only to not reach the light due to tripping over a 4-drawer dresser that had just fallen and scooted over about 2.5 feet off the wall. There had been a bunch of smaller things like that here and there over the years, until I reached the age of 19, when I was living in Hutchinson with my brother and sister-in-law. It became more of just acts of annoyance and walking around. It became interactive. It would grab me, poke me, blow in my ear and many other things, and eventually it began to try and trick me or play games with me. So me and my sister were home. Me and my brother worked together, but I had stayed home sick that day. I had gotten up that morning to shower and freshen up, hoping that it would make me feel better, and about 5 or so minutes into my shower, my sister started to holler at me telling me to hurry up, that she needed to use the bathroom. So I stopped the water and told her I was sorry for taking my time and that I would be out in just a second. I finished getting dressed, hung my towel and opened the door. When I came out to let her know I was done, I found the house empty. She'd been at work since 5:45 that morning and it was 9 a.m. and didn't get off until 4. What could have happened there? What was it trying to do? I still wonder to this day. Well, anyway, then came the terrors. Everything was going great throughout the day until I went to sleep. I hadn't had any night terror experiences until this. This is the night I feared for my life. I had a new job at this point on the 2nd shift at a fab shop in Yonder, Kansas. I wasn't sleep deprived. I got checked, nothing was wrong with me. This was a night terror. I don't know if it was the same entity that had been around me for these past 8 years, but that night, it would get violent. I got home that night and everything was fine. Nothing weird had happened and I got out the shower and went to my room. When I laid down for bed, I plugged my phone and went to fall asleep. I had this nightmare that I was completely irrelevant to anything that had happened to me. But this was just the start. In that dream, I was fully awake. I could feel everything. When I jumped, I felt myself wake up. This happened about 2 or 3 more times back to back. I woke up out of 3 dreams, 3 consecutive times that same night, each worse than before. I was wide awake at that point. I couldn't do anything to stop what happened next. I was just laying there on my phone while it was charging. I had it in my left hand resting on my chest watching Facebook reels when next thing I know my cord gets pulled from the wall and my phone goes with it. I'm shaken. I don't know what to do. Then I completely freeze. I physically cannot move. All I can do is move my eyes and barely swivel my head to and fro. My breathing is held at a very slow rate and I cannot speak. I tried screaming over and over and over again but couldn't speak. I eventually built the strength to throw myself off the bed and tried telling Siri on my phone to call my sister. I knew I couldn't speak. But if I could just get her to answer the phone, she could at least open the bedroom door and help somehow. I tried for what felt like hours to overcome whatever was attacking me, and eventually my movement became more free and I climbed, using only my arms to the door and out to the living room. I turned on every single light in the house, including the TV, and sat there for hours, not caring about losing sleep for work. As the night went on, it was hard to think about and comprehend what had just happened to me. I'm a huge believer in good and evil, the blessed and the wicked, which is exactly what made me think. This was a demon. Could it be the same one that found me when I was 14? That I can't say for sure. Maybe one day I'll find out, but for now, I'm just going to keep dealing with it. I'll figure it out one day. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's demonic tales, and if of course you did, you can let me know down below. and I will be back again tomorrow to carry on with Ghost Week. We're going to be heading into the haunted hospitals for a very special and favourite topic of mine, so be sure to come back then. I'd like to extend one final thank you to my members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen, and I've actually posted some free stories over there on Patreon, so anyone can access them. You just got to follow it over the linky thing and you can listen to them for free. But that's it from me, guys. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.